There's a general rule that any Middle East meeting should begin at least 15 minutes late, so I hope you will forgive me for being only 5 minutes late. But it is a real pleasure to introduce Munqith Dagher. I think the work he has done on polling has been pioneering in Iraq. He conducted what I think is the first real poll. They were not, shall we say, exactly free and easy under Saddam. He pioneered a lot of the polling efforts, so he brings a great deal of experience. And I have found in polling that's absolutely critical, because when I have seen people poll for the first time, almost invariably you end up with the poll presenting as many questions as it does answers. And he also brings to this particular subject a unique experience as an Iraqi general. And I think, again, the question when you're doing polling is, what is your practical experience? How much do you actually understand of the issues involved? I'm going to take just a few minutes to raise what I think is the background to the key question that he's going to address. For something like 3 years, we have been focusing on ISIS and on the security issue of one aspect of Iraq's stability, and that is ISIS as a caliphate, a pseudo-state, a major threat in terms of terrorism and violence within the area, but only one aspect of Iraqi stability. And now we have to face all of the issues in Iraqi stability. And these are issues which in some cases date back to the fall of the monarchy, which is the point at which you can most precisely date the lack of meaningful agricultural reform. I remember being in Iraq when state-owned enterprises became a massive investment area back when I was working for Ambassador Helms in Iran in the late 1970s. And these have become progressively more of a critical burden on the Iraqi economy ever since. And I think that as you look at this, what I'm going to do is just, if I can make this thing work. This is the map I think we're all familiar with. What has always struck me about this map is there's never really been a systematic census that looks at ethnic and sectarian divisions. But it is clear that we are not talking about a unified country, and that is one of the issues that Munqith will be addressing. What is less apparent, I think, if you have not been in Iraq, are the structural changes we now have to cope with. Iraq was a country of about 5 million people in 1950. During my first stay there, it was a country of about 9 million. When I went back during the Iran-Iraq War, in spite of the war, it rose from 13 to 18 million. Today, when we look at it, it is a country estimated at around 39 million, and it is a country that would double in population even with a declining birth rate. So when you talk about humanitarian relief or recovery, understand the pressures involved here. War, Islamic extremism, and violence are only part of the pressures that combine with ethnic and sectarian and tribal divisions. You also, as you can see from that population pyramid, have one of the youngest populations in the world. And that puts immense pressure on jobs and employment. There is no way in meaningful terms to actually understand unemployment in most developing countries. The problem basically is disguised unemployment. Large numbers of men and women are employed at low salaries with no incremental productive output. They basically have made-up jobs, and so the numbers tend to sharply underestimate. But even in direct terms, we are talking about youth unemployment in excess of 30%. When you talk about stability, when you talk about pressure and divisions and extremism, those numbers have to be addressed. And that comes through development, not through recovery, and not through humanitarian relief. And at this point in time, job creation has fallen far short of requirement. There is a problem with this and with some other numbers here in that the United States government tends to somehow be doing projections without having the population increase taken account of in unemployment figures in areas like per capita income in any structured way. And this is something which in reality you can't do. You have massive problems with state-owned enterprises, as I mentioned. Iraq by far has the most expensive and least productive state-owned enterprises in the MENA area. And that is, to put it mildly, a real distinction because the overall level of state-owned enterprise output and productivity is so low throughout this region. Oops, sorry about that. I think the other problem is governance. One thing that I think as Americans we might note is the World Bank is not talking about political ideology. It isn't all that concerned with democracy. What it is concerned with is the effective of governance. And I think Munqith will touch on this, but if you look at these numbers, what's really striking about it is these are some of the lowest performance estimates that the World Bank has for any country in the world in terms of governance. And if you look at it carefully, you will see that it has absolutely no clear set of performance measures that match the US effort to try to transform the level of governance. We made a little progress in some areas, and I think that's a very realistic reflection of what we did and didn't do. The progress, when it has come, has been as much Iraqi as it ever was anything the US attempted. Budget deficits are a key issue, but so is the failure to have business reform. This is a comparison by country of the World Bank ease of business. You'll notice that Iraq ranks 165th. That's the lowest of any country in the MENA region in terms of its ability to have business reform and change. It's one of the lowest in the world. And again, if you want stability, you have to have humanitarian relief, recovery, and development. You can say you're not going to indulge in nation building. I think Munqith is going to give you some very good, tangible reasons you're going to have to deal with it in human terms. But in economic terms, it's critical. And then finally, I would note, as we begin this process of trying to deal with a post-ISIS Iraq, we're talking about oil revenues which are about half of what they were at the peak some 3 to 4 years ago. And people talk about oil wealth. Well, with the population increases, basically in real terms and constant dollars, you have had a sharp decline to the point where Iraq is by no conceivable standards an oil-wealthy state. It is, as is often the case with OPEC, an oil-poor state, one where a dependence on oil economies and oil revenues has led to structural problems throughout the country that now have to again be solved if you're going to deal with the population issues. So let Munqith take over, because I think the key here for all of us is really we're not going to indulge in nation building. We're not going to focus on nation building. We're going to focus on security alone, given all of these numbers and trends and all of the problems that Munqith is going to brief you on.
Thank you, Anthony. The pointer. There is no pointer here. Or flipper.
Let's hope. I think that if we simply...
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh.
So that's right.
How's that?
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. Thank you, Anthony. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for Anthony and for the CSIS giving me this opportunity to be here again. I have been here now for a couple of times before, and it was always interesting to have this intellectual dialogue with such intellectual audience. My presentation will focus on Daesh in Iraq, and I will use this term. I think that all of you knows what I mean by Daesh. I prefer to use this instead of ISIS or ISIL or whatever. But I just want to tell the audience here about the full story of Daesh, and is it the final chapter now for that story, or we may see a new chapter in it. So let us go through the presentation. As the first pollster in Iraq, I have been dedicated most of my research since 2003 till now on tracing public opinion in Iraq. And since June 2014, I've dedicated most of my work to trace public opinion toward ISIL or toward Daesh, because I noticed that the public opinion can really gives a good signs about how healthy is the environment which incubate this monster, which we call it Daesh. So my presentation will be based on hundreds of thousands of face-to-face interviews that have been conducted over the last decade. Also tens of focus groups, especially in Sunni areas. Most interestingly, recently, the Iraqi government gave me the opportunity to access to some of these captured Daesh fighters, these terrorists, and they gave me an access to them, and I have interviewed till now more than 20 of them, different levels. Also, I have been provided with a good document, confiscated document from Daesh. So I've put all these in one presentation, which I will present to you. My base theory about Daesh is trying to explain why that sudden uprising in Daesh, and what made that monster released from the cave that it was in. Simply, I can say that Daesh is not a religious phenomenon. It's as many things that Daesh represent a religious extremist ideology. I think after seeing what I will present, you may change your mind. So let us go first with the first chapter. And I will go through it very quickly, the first chapter, because I have presented many presentations and figures on that before, and now it becomes part of the history. But it's good to know part of it. And just to, as a quotation, 16 out of 29 captured terrorists joined Daesh. They told me that they joined Daesh just to fulfill the basic physical and security needs. It's not because of their ideology. And actually, ISIL or Daesh benefited from the widely and strongly felt negativity among Sunnis in Iraq after 2003 invasion. In the areas where Daesh have surged, there exists a widespread feelings of injustice, deep resentment about basic inequality, and growing gap of trust between the governors and the governed. And I will show some figures about that. There was a deep dissatisfaction with the central government, and there were a lot of evidence on that. Let us see the first evidence on that. As you can see, this is tracing the public opinion of Sunnis in Iraq since 2010. And I've started with this because this is a benchmark when the US troops left Iraq here. As you can see, this simple question, standard question about do you think that things in Iraq are going in the right or the wrong direction? As you can see here, for Sunnis, the right direction has been declining sharply, and from March 2011 till it reached, it was 50%, it was 45% till it reached 10% only. 10% of Sunnis say that we are going in the right direction. And how much confidence do you have in the Iraqi government? As you can see, the gap between Shias' confidence and Sunnis' confidence, the gap between the up line and the bottom line. So on 2014, this was just 7 days before Daesh took over Mosul. 68% of Shias, they had trust in the government, while only 36% of Sunnis, they had trust in the government. And confident in the judicial system, or in the, as you can see here, Sunnis, only 30%, they have trust in the courts or in the justice system in Iraq, versus 68% of Shias. Confident in the Iraqi army, see the gap also. Only 28% on 2014, and June 2014, only 28% had trust in their army. We will see, of course, different picture later on. And this is another figure, how much confidence you have in the Iraqi police. Also, 41% versus 82% for Shia. That was, again, June 2014, just 1 week before Daesh took over Mosul and other Sunni areas in Iraq. And this is astonishing figure. As you can see here, safety feel, security feel? When we ask people about how unsafe do you feel in your neighborhood, which is supposed to be the most safe place for anyone, the neighborhood. Remember, we are talking about homogeneous neighborhoods in Mosul, in Tikrit, in these areas where there are only Sunnis. Only 10% on 2014, they felt safe versus 77% for Shias felt safe. So the basic needs of any human being, the security needs also had a serious problem at that time. This is why it was not strange to see how Sunnis' association with Iraq as the basis for their identity decreased sharply from 80% on 28 to just 40% on 2014. So that was the first chapter which enabled Daesh to take over these areas simply. Now, the maturation chapter, and by maturation I mean the chapter where Daesh took over Mosul and these other areas. What happened at that time? I have been lucky enough to work with a staff who risked their life to interview people inside Daesh areas at that time. So what I will present here is also based on public opinion surveys in Mosul, Salahuddin, and other areas that I have been able to approach at that time. What happened during that period? At that period, Daesh mainly focused on the deceiving people. One of that deception examples, what 5 terrorists stated to me that the main message that Daesh sent to these areas at that time, that we are going to conquer the world. We will not stop in Mosul. Next will be Baghdad, and then we will go and conquer the world. That made people in these areas feel happy that they eventually will take revenge of the world who treated them unfairly. So they heavily used this message and some other messages. And Daesh at that time, in June 2014, when they occupied Nineveh or Mosul, the capital of Nineveh, Sunnis welcomed the change in the beginning. And Daesh went through 2 different stages. In the first stage, they enjoyed a real honeymoon in that area. They had that honeymoon, and I will show you some of these figures, which shows how people in these areas, in the first place, welcomed Daesh. But actually, that lasted for a 1 year or 1.5 years, and then things turned around again, and especially by the end of 2015 and the beginning of 2016, and I will show you what happened at that time. This is from a telephonic poll that we did just 1 week after Daesh took over Mosul. As you can see, the main question, what happened in Mosul, was a result of what? We asked people, what do they think? That was an open-ended question. As you can see, only 6.5%, less than 20%, they thought of what happened in Mosul as either a result of foreign plot or occupation of Mosul by foreign armed groups. Around 80% of respondents, they gave different choices or different answers, but most of it focus on the wrong practices of the army and federal police, the wrong practices of the central government in Baghdad, result of conspiracy of the internal Iraqi politicians, or marginalization and sectarianism against Sunnis. So most of the reasons perceived by Mosul people at that time was due to something related with injustice feeling. And you can see here, when we ask them again the same question, if they feel safe in their neighborhood, now we have 82%. This was just 1 week after Daesh took over Mosul. More than 82%, they say that they feel safe. If you recall, it was only 10% just 2 weeks ago. Yes?
The graph here says it was 77%.
No. So this is unsafe, sorry. I'm sorry, yes. 77% they feel unsafe. They were feeling unsafe. Here now we have 82% feeling safe. So that was just, this change happened only in 2 weeks. Again, we are in the honeymoon period of, if I can call it a honeymoon for Daesh at that time. When we ask them, thinking about life in general, is it better or worse today than 18 months ago? As you can see, it started with a 21% saying better. That was on June 15. It raised or increased to 55% just on December 15. That was the end, almost the end of the honeymoon. 55%, they're saying that they feel now better under Daesh than they were feeling under the federal government. The consistent rise in the support for Daesh in Mosul. Again, this was on June 2014, when we asked them, does Daesh represent views and interests of people like you? Just 10%. This increased to almost 80% of people in Mosul say that Daesh represent the views and interests of people like me. Yeah, almost 40, I said.
Oh, you said 80?
80? Sorry, I'm become old. So that was the maturation stage. Now, going to the deterioration chapter. People, after a while, they really discovered Daesh reality. And as you can see from this quotation here, or from this, they were not able to protect us in Mosul from airstrikes, while they kept saying that they will conquer the world. This is what the terrorists told me. In the beginning, they provided food, some public services, and security. But after a while, they become very brutal with serious shortages in food and health services. So clearly, the honeymoon vanished. And as you can see here, it was 39%, yes? Now it dropped down to only 15% on June 2016. This was just or almost a few months before the Iraqi government and Iraqi security forces started their big campaign against Daesh in Mosul. Now this is again, when we ask people about thinking about life in general, it's better or worse today than 18 months ago. Now, on December 15, remember we say that almost 55% says that it's better. This decreased sharply to just 10%, saying that life now better. From December 15 to March 16. This is the real end or military end of Daesh. Here, this period, from December 15 to March 16, I've noticed a real decrease in public opinion toward Daesh. So now the Iraqi security forces almost retook all areas back, freed all areas back from Daesh. There are still very few areas on the borders of Iraq and Syria, but militarily, we can say that Daesh is right now, militarily, again, and I'll put more than one underline to the militarily, it's been finished. Now, what's going on in Iraq? How things are in Iraq right now? And is there any chances that Daesh or similar, or what I call them the fourth version of terrorism, reappear in Iraq? Is there such chance? Let us look first to the good news in Iraq right now. The good news, there is a new takeoff in Iraq politics. Remember this this slide which I showed in the beginning. It reached 10%. Those who say that, Sunnis who say that things in Iraq going in the right direction. This was January 2016. 51% on April 2017. And it is increasing. I'll tell you, I have a monthly public opinion survey wave in Sunnis area in Iraq. And I keep tracing the developments there. And the public opinion looks very optimistic in these areas. Things are really for them beginning to improve. And this is one of the evidence. Now, 63% of Sunnis living in these areas saying that things are going in the right direction. This also another evidence. Remember, we say that only 40% on 2014 attached themselves with Iraq, or their ID as Iraqis above all. Now this increased to 81%. This was in August 2017, just 2 months ago. Things in Iraq are going in the right direction. Just to compare, on July it was 10% who say that we are going in the, or June, 10%, now it's 63%. This is very interesting. How favorable is Al-Abadi? And I've compared it with Al-Maliki. on April 2014, as you can see here. Figures don't lie, yeah? So, and it keeps, and this is in August. Let me tell you the last figures that I have even improved more. The Iraqi forces, the federal forces, the army and police, now 93% of Sunnis, they have trust in it. Remember how much it was? It was 28% on June 2014 with the army, and with the police 41% only. Now it jumped to 93%. Frankly, this was really annoying me. On April 2017, when we asked people, how concerned are you that Daesh or similar organization will reappear in your city, almost 2/3 of Sunnis, 64%, 2/3 of Sunnis, almost 2/3, they say that they anticipate or they have this concern that Daesh will reappear in their areas. But this dropped down. Now we have only 26%, which means that people feeling more safe right now. They don't expect that Daesh, and even from the focus groups, from the in-depth interviews that I conducted there, this feeling is widely spread among people, among Sunnis in general. In general. And why I said in general, I will explain why. Because there are some concerns that needs to be addressed and needs to be met. How concerned are you that Iraqi politics will return to the way it was before Daesh captured Mosul? For Sunnis Arab, as you can see, almost 70% of Sunnis, they have this concern. 31% very concerned, and 38% somewhat concerned. So in total, the concern is almost 70% that things or politics will return to the way it was before Daesh took over Mosul. The concern about trust do you have in the Iraqi government to treat Sunnis the same way they treat Shias? Also, almost 50% of Sunnis, they have this concern that they will not be treated as equal as Shias. When we ask people about most important things to make sure that Daesh or other extremist organizations do not re-emerge in Iraq, this is an open-ended question. And we gave them the freedom to answer. As you can see, fighting corruption of local leaders was on the top of their concern. And they have this concern that this might bring back again Daesh to these areas. The corruption of local leaders, treating people equally regardless of sect or ethnic background, creating more jobs and opportunities for youth, because we really have a serious problem with unemployment in these areas, in Iraq in general, but also in these areas. Security forces and PMF, Al-Hajj, always look to us as what they call it in Iraq, Dawa'ish, as ISIL members. The participants in focus groups in Mosul and Anbas keeps repeating this. We have this concern, and we have been treated, they gave many examples, how some security force, some checkpoints, or Hashd al-Sha'bi treated them, keep saying to them that you are Daesh, you are ISIL members, you are ISIL supporters, you are. So people, they have this concern in these areas to be treated as Daesh or part of Daesh. I joined Daesh because this is one of the, what I've been told by one of the young terrorism whom I met. He said that I joined Daesh because no one wanted to give me a second chance after being released from prison. He has been sent to prison by the Iraqi security forces. They suspected him. They found nothing against him. After 1 year, they released him, but they keep coming to his door, to his house, day after day, asking him, bothering him, sometimes even doing some bad things to him. So he said that eventually they treated me as Daeshi or as one of ISIL member. So let me be like this. Now we have some alerts. And these alerts, I saw it on 2014. Almost similar signs, similar alerts. And especially now in Al-Anbar. Especially now in Al-Anbar. Some red flags there. I will show you. When we ask Sunnis about, in general, do you think that things in Iraq are going in the right or wrong direction? Remember, we say that Sunnis, 63%, they say that it's going in the right direction. But for Al-Anbar, it's only 36%. And it's a significant difference. How much do you trust Iraq's central government and the local government? For the Iraq central government, again, 63% of Sunnis, they trust the federal government versus 41% in Anbar. The local government, it's a totally miss in Anbar. Only 25%. They trust their local government versus 43%. And by the way, for Sunnis right now, they trust the federal government much more than they trust their local governments. For jobs and unemployment, the rates for Sunnis, 24%. For Anbar, it's 36%. These are serious alerts and serious red flags in Al-Anbar. Do you think that life in Iraq in general will be better or worse? Sunni, 60% will be better in 1 year versus 46% in Al-Anbar. And for worse, 11% Sunnis versus 20% for Anbar. How much are you worried about ISIL sleeper cells? As you can see, in Al-Anbar, 71%. They are worried about the sleeping cells in their cities, in their city. Again, this is, I'll show you that 81% of Sunnis right now, they feel that they are Iraqis above all. They are not Sunnis, they are not Arab, they are not Muslims, they are not whatever, they are Iraqis. Versus 60% in Anbar. Significant difference. This is about Al-Anbar. More recently, as you I expect that all of you followed up what happened in Kurdistan. This is, again, one of the alerts that should be taken seriously. Politics in Iraq are not going in the right direction, so we expect more crisis. Let us see what happened in Kurdistan from a public opinion view. Just 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, I made a face-to-face public opinion survey with Kurds only, in Kirkuk, Suleymaniye, and Anbar. Kirkuk, Suleymaniye, and Erbil. The field work was from 19 to 22 of October. Just to see, we know that Kurds in general, they voted for the independent state. So after what happened in Kirkuk and the federal government re-controlled Kirkuk and other disputed area, I just wanted to see how Kurds now feeling after that. This is interesting. Some people, they thought that Kurdistan is a real oasis of democracy and everything. Here, these numbers show to you that there was a deep crisis in Kurdistan. So as you can see, from 2010, here when the US forces left Iraq, you see the decline in going in the right direction among Kurds. It started 84%, saying that we are going in the right direction in 2010. On July 2017, it reached 20%. Now, the surprise, after the referendum on the 25th of September, things worse, only 10%. So instead of fixing things by referendum, things went even worse. This was on October 2017, just a few weeks after the referendum. So there is a crisis there. Do you think that referendum done in 25th of September made life better for you or and your family? Only 7% say that it made it better for me. And most of these 7% are in Erbil. While 61% say that no. On July 2017, we had a nationwide poll, and we asked people in Kurdistan about referendum. This was 2 months before the referendum. 56% were with the referendum and with the independency of Kurdistan. This decreased to 22% on October 2017. Now, what do you prefer for the future of Kirkuk? This is for Kirkuk people only, for Kirkuk Kurds. For Kirkuk Kurds only. As you can see, the vast majority, except 28%, who say that they want to be a part of the independent Kurdistan state of Iraq. All others, they gave different choices, different answers, but in general, they want to be part of Iraq, whether as a federal or different choices, be affiliated to the central government directly, or to become region, or to become part of the current Kurdistan region, whatever, but not independency. Not independency. This question has been asked for all Kurds, not only Kirkuk Kurds. What do you prefer for the future of Kirkuk? Sorry. Yeah, future of Kurdistan, of Kirkuk. This is 70%. Now we have, I didn't show the other figure. There was a mistake. Anyway, what do you prefer for the future of Kurdistan? There are clear differences among Kurds. While in Erbil, public opinion is divided. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. 1/3 for independency, 1/3 for staying with Iraq, and 1/3 say don't know or no answer. You know, the pollsters knows what don't know or no answer means mostly. While in Sulaymaniyah, 90% they want to stay with Iraq with different choices. And in Kirkuk, 72% they want to stay with Iraq with different choices. So now I will end with this. The $1 million question: why do we want to defeat Daesh? Is it for a better life or keeping power of different players? Because it's two different roads, two different approaches. And frankly, what I'm witnessing now, what I'm seeing now, is that most parties collaborated to defeat Daesh not for better life of Iraqis, but to keep its powers. Whether these parties are international, regional, or local, they want, really, they want power. And it's two different approaches. I will leave it here, and thank you again.
I think we will open things up for questions. One comment I would make: Munqith showed you some of the early data before 2014. It's interesting to see that public opinion polling data because the U.S. was keeping track of the patterns of violence inside Iraq, particularly sectarian and ethnic, during that same period. And under Maliki, what you saw was, before Daesh even invaded, a rise after the election to the point where the levels of violence returned to 2008. You had a major problem within the government. The one thing that you don't get, of course, is the Shiite area where there was much less violence. I would have to say we have almost no reliable economic data on how the conditions of life exist within the Shiite areas. What we do know is you have major problems with employment. You have a massive subsidy in Shiite areas of state-owned enterprises, which has been critical to reducing the level of resentment. And you now have a problem that both in the Kurdish area and in the central government, they are effectively bankrupt, and you also have a commitment to the security sector in the central government, which is equal to about 10% of the gross domestic product, which, given the fact that we have something on the order of 3.8%, and NATO finds it a little difficult to get to 2%, gives you an idea of the overall strains here. So we have a Shiite problem, a Sunni problem, and a Kurdish problem, and massive structural problems. And one of the things that you didn't address, and I guess I would ask you this question, so far there's almost no physical evidence of money going to produce significant amounts of recovery in the Sunni areas. There is money going to the humanitarian side. Given these polls, how long can the government go on not helping with recovery? And how much of that might explain your polls in Anbar?
Yeah. It's a very good question, excellent question, yes. I've said it before that the government is under a real crisis. It is economically suffering because of the oil revenue and the commitment toward the huge public sector. They have almost nothing to afford to these areas to reconstruct it. People being patient in Mosul, in Anbar, in Salah ad-Din, and other areas being patient for a while because they witnessed and they lived under the worst nightmare in the world, which is Daesh, and they hope for a real improvement. After how much time this will change, I don't have a precise answer, but I can see some red flags again about people being not really patient, or about the end of their patience. And I have to say also that I saw a good reaction from the Iraqi government, central government, especially when I met some of the top officials, including Al-Abadi. Good reaction towards responding to these needs, but they don't have much to afford, actually. So there is a real need for international efforts, for a real strategy for reconstruction, a real strategy and a plan, clear plan, with identifying who will be the real players on the ground to implement this plan. Otherwise, a new generation is coming. And my fear is that from the new generation. Let me tell you one piece of information. Out of these 30 fighters, 30 terrorists whom I interviewed, over 20 of them were 20 or 21 years old, which means that when they joined Daesh, they were 17 years. And some of them were 16 years old when they joined Daesh. So my fear is from this young generation who is not identified by the intel community. The intelligence community right now, they knows all details about Daesh current fighters, Daesh current terrorists. They knows everything, but they don't know about these young children who lives right now with their families in Mosul, in Anbar, and they have been exposed to the extremist ideology for 3 years and witnessing every single day blood, slaughtering, everything. And they are much more equipped with all tools to be worse terrorists in the world. So this is my concern. If the economy will not recover, reconstruction will not be done in a proper way, in a fast way, then God forbidden, we are willing, or we are heading towards worst nightmare.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me open things up for questions. I would ask that first you do make a question, something that has a question mark at the end of it. Second, if I recognize you, please introduce yourself so people know. And I think we have some microphones to help you out. So first, the gentleman in the third row there.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ziad Saeed. I'm Iraqi. I'm coming from field, by the way. I just coming to United States tonight. Actually, I would like to say yes. All what you say, it was very correct. And I would like to add to, we should also focus on two things. First, justice system, and second, legislation. What you mentioned about the juveniles who belong to Daesh, actually I also interview a lot of juvenile belong to Daesh.
I'm going to
before.
have to ask you to ask a question, please. Sorry.
Yeah, and I find that there is a lot of reasons, beside of economic reason, encourage them to be with Daesh. And now we should focus on justice system, how they will deal with 4,000 juvenile in the prisons now. Because if we not be wise, we can't deal with the
I'm
future.
really sorry, but
I'm sorry.
These are for questions,
very
not
much.
for speeches.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
The gentleman over in the second row there.
Abdullah Al-Qassab of Arab Center, DC. Thank you, Dr. Dagher, for your excellent presentation. I just want to ask, for the other collateral reasons which you might think about, which brought the situation in the Sunni areas to such deterioration, to mention just some of it, the militias, the destructions of the Sunni cities, the deniance of the Sunni population who want to just traverse Baghdad to go to their areas. I think these are some of, what are your comments about that? Yeah. Thank you.
So I'll take it one by one, or
Why don't
what
we
do you prefer?
get another one more and just take two at a time?
Thank you. Michelle Gelfand, professor at UMaryland. Munqith, I'm curious about your opinion, the million-dollar question of the role of the international community going forward, what your advice would be in helping to move toward a better life.
Okay, first of all, thank you for these questions. Ziad, you are correct. One of the things that I discovered also from the research on Daesh and meeting some of these terrorists, that jails, prisons were the incubator of these terrorists. Most of these terrorists, including Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the jail or the prison was the starting point. And in all cases, in all 30 interviews that I made, all of them, they experienced the jail or the prisons, whether under the U.S. forces or under the Iraqi government. So, and most of them, or some of them, let me say that, they had nothing to do with terrorism. It's just for suspicious or just, and now there are people reporting about others for revenge or other. It's a very bad and very critical situation. The Iraqi security forces, some of the al-Hashid, they don't really differentiate between the real terrorists and others. So Yes, jail is one of, and this answered Dr. Al-Qassab also a question. There are many other reasons for people joined Daesh. Some of it's the deep feeling of injustice, some of it of bad treatment by the Iraqi forces and by Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi, some real humanitarian discrimination and crimes took place. All these are really there. People, especially in Anbar, people prevented from going to Baghdad, prevented from going to Baghdad. On the checkpoints, they are humiliated every single day by the checkpoint people, whether these people are from the army or the police or others. So there are many other reasons that I can not show all of it. But the good thing, and for the last 3 times I have, or the last 2 meetings that I have with Iraqi officials, it's for the first time since 2003, I see some of these officials really addressing or acknowledging these problems and trying to do something. Whether they will be successful or not, this is a different story. But at least I can see that on the Prime Minister level himself, he is aware about these things. How he will respond, I saw some positive signs, but there are a lot to be done yet. Sorry, for Michel, the international community. If I may to advise, first of all, they have to find a reliable local partners. Reliable local partners. Most of this money, and we have been talking this morning with Professor Cordesman about that, most of this money will go to the pockets of some people. So unless there are a reliable, trusted, not current local governments. Unfortunately, the US government and other, they are dealing with not right people. Let me say that.
You know, Russia, Turkey, Iran, the United States, the Arab states near Iraq, there's a lot of international. If you can find a community, I would regard it as a major achievement. But I do have to say, having had to teach this, every time I hear the phrase international community in the real world, it is somebody from a diplomatic structure saying, I'm not going to do it, we're not going to do it, somebody else should do it. Let's see. Over here, please. The gentleman in the front row.
Thank you for your presentation. My name's John Sullivan. Till recently, I was with a group called the Center for International Private Enterprise. Now I'm at George Mason. But when we were in Iraq, and this is going to be a question, when we were in Iraq in the early days, we found in the business associations a great deal of cooperation between Shia and Sunni. And you mentioned, but you didn't develop the proposition that this is not a religious split. So tell us something about why is there such a split? Is it just group politics?
Yeah. Well, so we'll take another question, but just to mention that I have worked with your organization in that early days, so I'm aware about this. It's totally not sectarian nor religious thing. I'll give you one example. When I asked people, these terrorists, these 30 terrorists, one question about, or couple of questions about being discriminated as Sunnis in their areas. They joined Daesh because they felt that there is a discrimination against them. Most of them, they told me this, look, doctor, we are from areas where we didn't see Shias in our life. We are living, most of them, they live in villages, Sunnis villages in the west or in the north, where are no, it's a homogeneous society. So we didn't feel injustice or discrimination. Yes, we felt many different things, but not this religious issue. Actually, they don't know much about Sunnis and Shias, because in Iraq we didn't have this problem before. What is Shias, what is Sunni, what is the differences between. On the intellectual level, yes, there were these maybe discussions about Shias, Sunnis, but on the average level, there wasn't. It's a really a conflict of interest, of power, as I've addressed it here. It's about power. And some people, unfortunately, using Daesh to gain power. And some people using the war against Daesh to gain power again. It's for both parties. They are not aiming to make things better in Iraq. They are aiming to gain much power. It's a power. Do you know that I found in some of the top level leaders in Daesh, couple of them are Shias. Couple of them are Shias, and they name them Abu Ali Shi'i.
The lady in the second row, and I'll take another question after that.
Hi, Pat Bergstresser, former advisor to the State Department for Iraq. And I received something that's stating that Barzani is stepping down. Any truth to that?
He publicly
Yes.
resigned. This was yesterday. So
Yeah. Yesterday, he
that's
publicly
easy to
retired.
answer. The gentleman in the third row.
Hi, Charlie Rogan, Artists International. I was just curious about your survey work and the perceptions of Iran within Iraq, and how, and I think this feeds well off your question about sectarianism, how sort of that's been politicized. I mean, the sort of sexy term in DC at the moment is the politicization of sectarianism, and I haven't really heard much about how you think that Iran is playing in terms of the Iraqi parliament and then more broadly across the region, because we've seen since the early 2000s they've been actively involved in actually supporting groups like AQI.
Well, no one can deny that Iran has been involved heavily in the Iraqi internal issue since 2003. And actually, I do believe, I'm one among many who believes that Iran, if not created Daesh, which I don't believe in it, created Daesh, but it benefited from Daesh a lot. Again, it brings us back to the same question. Is it for religious thing? You think that Iran involved in Iraq because they really support Shias? This is the question. Or because they have interests in Iraq, and they want to keep interest, as the US has interest in Iraq, as others has interest in Iraq, but in a different way. So they used Shias and sectarianism as a vehicle to reach their goals, which are keeping control of Iraq and playing with Iraq as a card against others.
Gentleman in the front row.
Herb Rose, in response to an earlier question, you said that a lot of the resentment it relates to power and discrimination. Is that power and discrimination particularly related to jobs and economics?
No, not only for job, and it's power in general. And the different parties in Iraq, they used jobs and economy as a justification, unemployment, bad economy, as a justification to address their goals, which are keeping control of these areas. One of the things that we should think about it, we saw the differences between al-Maliki and al-Ibadi. Both are Shias, both are prime minister, both are from the same party. So if it is ideological thing, if it is a religious thing, then why that differences between two people from the same party, from the same sect? It's more than economy or religious. It is about gaining power in general.
One comment, though, that you have to bear in mind. Transparency International, the World Bank, rates Iraq is something on the order of the 6th to 7th most corrupt country in the world.
Yeah.
When you have that level of corruption, it impacts at every level. And people tend to worry about it at the top, but it permeates at the bottom. So virtually every citizen sees some reason to feel discriminated against or to feel that the government structure has failed them. So blending economics and politics is a little more difficult than simply sort of standard group politics. Let's see, I'm going to, the gentleman over here had his hand up, so I'm going to.
This is Aram Akar. My question is about Hashd al-Sha'bi. So do you have any study in Sunni society and how they approach Hashd al-Sha'bi, which is Shia militia, and they get support from Iran? Are they really okay with that? Or because most of the expert thinks Hashd al-Sha'bi is going to replace ISIS somehow in the future?
Let's take another question. The lady in the third row over there.
Thank you. Nina Jarpetidze of Edison Research. A question about your findings about independence of Kurdistan. Do you plan to track this attitude over time? How confident are you that what you found is actually the reality of feelings in that region, given the sample size? And how do you explain such significant variance between three locations? Thank you.
Okay. About Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi or the PMF, I know that some people want to hear that Sunnis hate Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi, and some people want to hear that Sunnis like Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi. So in Iraq, I always face with this. To tell you what the people expressed in these areas about Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi, they have positive feeling in these areas, positive feeling in general about Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi, but they don't want Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi to be in their areas or to continue as an organization in Iraq, as a formal organization. This is a summary to this. They feel favor toward Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi because it participated in freeing them. It participated. Don't forget that in Al-Mosul, Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi, they don't really enter to Al-Mosul. They were not part of the battle. It's not like in Al-Anbar or in Salah ad-Din. So people in general in these areas, they feel a kind of appreciation toward Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi because they have been participating in freeing them, but at the same time, when we ask them, do they want them to stay? They say no, definitely no. And do they want them to continue as part of the security forces? Also, they want them to be dissolved. So this is in general. Now, about Kurdistan. Yes, I've been tracing the public opinion in Kurdistan for a long time, since 2003. And as a pollster, and you are from Edison, yes, you work with polling. So as we always say that the poll, it is a snapshot. It is a snapshot. You cannot understand what's going on by just looking to the last picture. You have to put it beside other pictures to have a trend. And so the trend, yes, there is a deep feeling of ethnicity and of historical injustice among and that addressed this in the referendum on 25th of but as any other human being, we all dreams, but when we wake up from the dreams, we realize that there are some realities in the life that we should face. So what I just showed or presented here was the realities that people currently in Kurdistan feeling about it. And by the way, it's even before the referendum, in Sulaymaniyah, especially in Sulaymaniyah, there was only less than 30% who supported the referendum.
Why 80% of them support yes to the
Well, let's take questions in order. I think, too, that, yes, we need to be...
Which election?
Let's not get involved in this.
Oh, okay, all right.
We only have a few more minutes. I'm going to take people in turn. This gentleman has had his hand up for a while.
Thank you. Bo Wilcox from the Osgood Center. My question is, what is the general opinion of those you interviewed? Which direction do they want to see the government take? Do they want to...
Of what?
Of those you interviewed.
Yes.
Which direction do they want the government to take when it comes to aid? Do they want more help from the Middle Eastern region, or is there more willingness to accept aid from Western or developed countries?
You mean Sunnis, or you mean who? I mean, whom I interviewed, the Iraqis in general, or?
Iraqis in general.
And Iraqis in general, they don't care from where that, as any other. They don't care about it, really. They just need some help.
Let's see. I'm going to try to get the lady in back there.
Hi, thank you for the discussion. My name is Maria Teglund, former fellow at CSIS and now at World Youth Leadership Network. My question would be about the current situation in Mosul and the infiltrated soldiers, ISIS soldiers. How big a problem do you think that is, if you even think that is a problem? And also versus vice versa with the public opinion about that. Is there any kind of data
about
infiltrated ISIS soldiers in Mosul?
Soldiers, ISIL?
Infiltrated ISIS soldiers, or...
It's because ISIL, they don't have soldiers, they have terrorists.
Yeah, but ISIS terrorists in that case, yeah.
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 Yeah. I'm not sure about it. I don't have any solid evidence about it. But in general, the sentiment toward Daesh in Mosul is a way negative or worse toward Daesh than other areas. They really suffered a lot in Mosul, and it will be very rare if Daesh reappeared or similar organization reappeared in Mosul in the first. It can be in Anbar, but not in Mosul. Especially I'm talking about the city of Mosul, the city. the urban areas, the Mosul people, the Mosulian peoples, not the rurals or the other. Deep negative feelings towards Daesh. I don't think that they have chances in the city of Mosul.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming up to 11 o'clock, and we have a tradition of trying to end things when we're supposed to. Let me get a couple of quick questions, and then I'll let you choose how to deal with it. This gentleman, may I ask that we try to keep the questions short?
Thank you. John Schnitker. Until recently, I was the World Food Programme's Food Security Advisor. Your first slide attributed some of the rise of Daesh to a lack of understanding by the government of Iraq. I took that to be a very, very kind statement. And do you see anything changing that might show that the government of Iraq will be understanding and responsive to the current situation they face regarding the Sunni population?
Okay, let me get a couple of more. Back there.
Hi, James Dickey, James by IIHS Market. So you've been doing this polling in Iraq for quite some time. Have you seen a change in how the Iraqi people, irrespective of their ethnicity or sectarian leanings, respond to polling and pollsters over that time? Related to that, do you believe that social media accurately portrays the feelings of the Iraqi people towards the central government?
Back, fourth row in the back there.
Chaz Jones, American University. Just regarding post-ISIS Iraq, what country do you believe is most important for the United States to engage in, over Iraq's future?
Other than Iraq? Why don't you go ahead? And,
okay. To respond to your question about the Iraqi government, and one of the bad habits or bad things that the U.S. government teaches the Iraqi government maybe is that the term of government. In U.S., when you say that U.S. government, what do you mean by U.S. government? Which arm of the government? Do you have one government? The term is very broad. In Iraq, it's the same. It's the same. I mean, I know for sure that the prime minister and some of his assistants are willing to do things better or responding better in a better way. I know that for sure. But does that mean this is the Iraqi government? No, I don't believe. We have a deep, as we call it, the deep government. The deep government, which means that we have different militias, different players, including regional players. So I cannot say that. What I'm sure about it is that there are at least part, or a good part in the government wants things to be improved. And for the public opinion and social media, when we started back on 2003, the response rate was almost 95% in the old 2003, 2004, because people found it as a channel to express their opinion. Now it is different. Now we have it on around 80 to 85%. Still very high. Still very high. Social media, does it reflect? It reflects the Iraqi young generation in a way, but not the Iraqi public opinion, nor the poor Iraqis, nor the uneducated. Don't forget that in Iraq right now we have almost 25% illiterate. So I cannot say that it, for the countries, all countries, but before these countries involve, Iraqis have to decide themselves, have to come to an agreement by themselves, and then everything followed. But with the current situation between Iran, USA, different, I don't think that this will help a lot.
I do have to point out that you don't get to vote for your neighbors.
Yeah.
But they are always there, and you don't get to vote for world powers. They tend to arrive. But ladies and gentlemen, it is 11 o'clock, more or less. And yeah, I'd like you all to join me in thanking Munqith in the usual manner. Thank you. We will incidentally put his presentation up on the website, so if any of you want the data or the slides I showed earlier, they'll be on the CSIS website.